Hello, my big community. I would like to thank you because today we are more than 1000 subscribers to this channel. Welcome to this core lecture. This topic is going to be an introduction to SAP CX or SAP Hybris. As an agenda, we are going to discuss SAP Hybris and its background, the release cadence, and the architecture from database to frontend, the Spring framework and the role it plays in SAP Hybris, and the configuration of the SAP Hybris suite. As a background to Hybris, it was founded in 1997 in Switzerland. They moved to headquarters in Munich, where they reside today. Major private equity investment was made in 2011. And in August 2013, SAP acquired the company. This made Hybris part of one of the largest platforms worldwide. Rapidly assimilated into the SAP product line with support from most products, example ERPs, is for HANA. So what is Hybris? Hybris is a Java Spring Framework based closed source e-commerce solution for enterprise level customers. SAP Hybris is predominantly used as a full end-to-end e-commerce solution, but use as a product or content management system is also possible. Likewise, Hybris has extensive data and order management capabilities that can be combined or used in a standalone fashion. The base architecture is the platform, which realizes functionality to the end user via modules and extensions that are presented to the end user by the front end. Don't worry if these terms don't seem familiar to you. We will be discussing them through the lecture. Before we take a deep dive, let's review the resources that are available to you, the student. The Udemy course forum and runhybris.com. The official Hybris wiki should be your first touch point of any question regarding SAP Hybris or this course. This is the official wiki that is available for partners and licensees as such. If you are an existing SAP Hybris, be sure to contact your license holder and gain access. There is also Hybris Experts and informal Hybris on a message board, which is also available to wiki access users. Finally, Stack Overflow has limited but helpful posts on most topics. SAP Hybris follows a numbered release cadence. This number, for example, might be up to 4 digits long. SAP Hybris used to have a 4-digit release number, example 6.5.1.2. This number is broken down as 6, this is the major release, and is roughly every 2 years. 5 is a new feature and is roughly every 3 months. 1 for minor features, and there is no API changes allowed between major releases. 2, rare number, and is for critical patches and is only issued as required. This naming convention has changed since August 2018. The first 2 digits refers to the year, the last 1 to the month. For example, 1905 refers to May 2019. It's now time to take a look at the SAP Hybris architecture from the database to the front end. As you can see from this diagram, we are presenting the SAP Hybris stack. Don't worry if this diagram seems complicated. We are going to be discussing each element in turn. However, let's briefly review the diagram. At the very bottom, we have the database. We then have the application server, the SAP Hybris core platform, its extensions, the APIs, the accelerator, and the various front-end. These front-ends are present to the client or the back-office user and ultimately what the user uses to interact with SAP Hybris. The first element we are going to discuss is the database. The database is not strictly a Hybris component, but it's instrumental in the operation of the suite. Data is persisted in the database and likewise cached when appropriate in the SAP Hybris suite. Caching is very important to the SAP Hybris suite, and as such will feature heavily in this course. We recommend when we are discussing caching that you take a few notes, as it's very important to understand this concept. Hybris is largely database independent and can run on most major database offerings. There is no preferred database, but MySQL, MS SQL, SAP HANA, and Oracle are popular choices. Note there is concurrently little evidence to support high-performance database, example SAP HANA, as having significant performance gains in standard SAP Hybris installations. It's important to choose the database that is right for your organization, and when you are completing your code base that you performed through performance testings. Lastly, it's important to the Hybris suite must always be used to read and write to the database as direct database access, for example, via custom code outside Hybris APIs can cause data inconsistencies. This is something that you and your developers should be keenly aware of. The next element we are going to discuss is the application server. Hybris, being Java-based system, runs with the Java virtual machine on a serverless container or a J2EE compliant application server, example Apache Tomcat. Hybris comes pre-bundled with an optimized version of Apache Tomcat, including relevant caching and persistence mechanisms. This is the best, let's say the best or recommended way to run Hybris. However, Hybris can also put bundles fit to place on your own servers. It's recommended here to proceed with caution, as the optimized version included with Hybris is most certainly the best one to use. The next and arguably most important element is that of the platform. This is the core of SAP Hybris offering, the services and functionality needed to run and operate the suite. The platform layer abstracts the various data and functionality streams into discrete units and exposes them to a higher layer of the suite. An example of this is the persistence layer that handles database access and caching. It's important to take note of this. Core or platform code should never be altered. Instead, extensions and customization should be made in line with Hybris best practices, example in the /custom folder. Don't worry if this concept seems new. We are gonna be discussing this in the next section. The next element as discussed in the platform section is that of extensions. These are bundles of functionality that are ready to use and leveraged by the developer in the SAP Hybris ecosystem. They can be used singularly but often have interdependence, being strongly leveraged in accelerator offerings. Allow for extensive customization and abstraction within the Hybris suite by using extensions. The Hybris core code is not altered. This makes migration between Hybris versions much simpler. A further layer of abstraction from the SAP Hybris core code is that of APIs. So the APIs are subject to continuous update, but some commonly used APIs are the Service Layer API, Web Service API, and Virtual JDBC API. The Hybris Web Service framework is based on the RESTful architecture, thereby providing secure, CRUD access to all models in the service layer over a widely adopted protocol. As an example of use of the API is mobile app. This mobile app may consume JSON from Hybris, and this will be presented to us via the RESTful architecture. The amalgamation of APIs and extensions comes together with accelerators. One of the best features of SAP Hybris and the significant selling point of the suite, these are out of the box, uses collection of extensions and functionality that create basic building blocks in a project. For example, B2C storefront. Using an accelerator, a company could develop a storefront in less than a day, and provided no custom code was required. You could be deployed within a week, for example. This is a rare occurrence, but it just goes to show how quick accelerators can get a company up and running from zero to a full shop. As such, these fast development cycles and here and the best practices really strong selling point of SAP Hybris. Their use is not mandatory, and flexibility allows a project to pick and choose from examples shipped within the SAP Hybris. For example, you may have a B2C storefront but require B2B functionality. As a result, you can join B2C and B2B accelerator, creating a solution that suits your organization perfectly. At the very top of the stack is the front end. This is the look and feel exposed to end users. Either be the storefront or the cockpit, Spring MVC is the core technology in use here. But Hybris allows for easy integration to all modern web designs frameworks, example, AngularJS. In fact, SAP Hybris can be abstracted to an entirely different framework and service, only using web services to SAP Hybris for content retrieval. An example here will once again come back to a RESTful mobile application. As discussed in the previous slides, Hybris uses the MVC or model view and control design paradigm of Spring to present the front end to the end user. The model manages data logic and rules applications. The view is the output representation of the information from the model, for example, displaying a grid of products to the end user from the data returned, and the controller accepts input and converts the command for both the model and or the view to leverage. Okay, now that we have completed our journey through the SAP Hybris stack, let's once again take another view of this. In this particular diagram, we have the database which connects to the application, server which is running the core platform which ultimately exposes business logic via presentation to the end user in their given domain, for example, a B2B web shop. It's now apparent that the SAP Hybris Suite makes strong use of a layered architecture. There are a number of layers that are quite important, and we are going to discuss 4 of them here. The first layer is the presentation layer, which is composed of service component, Spring MVC, and the views. The end user ultimately, this is represented to the user as they would interact with it, for example, a product listing. The second layer is the service layer, and as an SAP Hybris developer, this is where you would be spending most of your time. This is the Hybris API which operates via plain old objects. In terms of how this would be represented, to you this would be Java class and code which makes extensive use of the Hybris APIs. The third layer, and arguably the most important, is that of the type layer, that's composed of definitions of business objects known as types, and their fields known as attributes, made via the items.xml and associated XML files. How this will be represented to the end user is items and associated data XML representation. The type system within Hybris is an entire election itself, and we will be coming back to it later in the course. The last layer is that of the persistence layer, which creates an abstraction for the database for data persistency and caching. This layer is largely transparent but should never be circumvented. For example, direct SQL access via Java code in terms of how this data is represented. It's SQL data which is passed in a compliant manner to the underlying suite database. So let's bring our stack together in the SAP Hybris server. It's a pre-configured server based on Apache Tomcat. It's a production-ready configuration, streamlined for the SAP Hybris suite. It's customized at runtime based on templates for development and production deployments. This also includes debug mode. It's highly OS independent. Easily transportable core base between installation and environments. Is configurable as a service on Windows and Linux, and ultimately is safeguarded by an external wrapper to restart the Apache Tomcat Java virtual machine in the event of stop or bad events. The Java Spring Framework plays an important role in the SAP Hybris suite. This course is not development focused, but I believe it's important to understand the role of the Spring Framework, the Spring Framework plays within SAP Hybris. So what is Spring Framework? The Spring Framework is an application framework and inversion of control container for Java platform. It's open source and widely supported, being maintained by Spring Source. Hybris makes use of the majority of the Spring paradigms, and effective development in Hybris is dependent on the understanding of the framework. If you choose to develop an SAP Hybris, the following topics are worthy of review. First, dependency injection. So Spring Framework is used heavily and provides better decoupling and improved stability. This is also known as the inversion of control. Second, aspect-oriented programming is not used by default, but usable for extending areas that are not customizable by default or when implementing cross-cutting concerns. Third, the Spring MVC, which we have mentioned before, is a request-based framework used in the accelerators and end-user display operations. Finally, the Spring Security, used for authentication and basic authorizations. The last element I wish to discuss in this lecture is how to configure the SAP Hybris. This is done through the file local.properties, and this is the center of configuration for SAP Hybris. It's editable in any text editor, and parameters are stored on each line with dot and equals notation. It's important to note that the parameters are read at startup only. Changes made during runtime will not be reflected, but can be changed in HAC, Hybris Administration Console, temporarily. The file is located in the hybris/config folder and supersedes project.properties in the core files. Local properties is instrumental in configuring SAP Hybris. To recap this lecture, we had an introduction to SAP Hybris as a company and their history. We reviewed the SAP Hybris technology stack into SAP Hybris learned architecture. We reviewed the Spring Framework and how it's important for SAP Hybris development. Finally, we reviewed the configuration of Hybris via local properties. Thank you for watching this lecture, and we'll see you in next one. If you are not subscribed yet to our channel, please do it. Click the bell. Thank you.